We're on item number 6 now. It's another briefing item. It involves the King County Prosecuting Attorney's Office, and we've asked them to talk about the community justice initiatives that they have been working on aimed at serving the youth of King County. And I'm going to turn to our staff, Jenny Giambattista, who will give some introductory remarks and hopefully introduce our panel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, committee members. Jenny Giambattista, Council Central staff.
Yeah, you need to bring that a little closer to you. Yeah.
Thank you. For our presentation today, the presentation will be a discussion by our prosecuting attorney on the strategies and programs to minimize juvenile incarceration. So we have with us today Mr. Dan Satterberg, our King County prosecutor. We have Mr. Hung, as well as Mr. Thomas, who is the Director of Community Justice Initiatives for the Prosecuting Attorney's Office. Mr. Chair, I would like to, without further ado, turn it over to the Prosecuting Attorney's Office. Thank you.
Okay, but did you share with us Mr. Jimmy Hung's title?
Oh, I'm sorry for it is Chief of the Juvenile Division for the King County Prosecuting Attorney's Office.
Thank you, Jenny. Now I'll turn to our County Prosecutor, Dan Satterberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's good to be with you and members of the committee. We are here to talk, and first of all, I want to commend you for listening to the national expert who lives locally. We are well served to listen to Dr. Troopin and his vision for how we can move forward. We do need a new building. Anybody who's been to the old building knows that, but the new building should be new and should anticipate the future of what we're trying to do with justice for young people in King County. And to paraphrase his Japanese proverb, I think what we're going to talk about today is action with vision. That's what we've been trying to do in taking innovative steps, working together with the community. And Mr. Thomas occupies a role that this council created for our office, the Director of Community Justice Initiatives. It was Mr. Gossett's idea to put this in our office budget to coordinate the very many different programs that we have. And so part of our presentation today is to tell you about the return on investment for that position. And I think you'll agree that it's been a smart move for all of us. And Mr. Thomas is doing great work with the community. The idea of community justice is to share both our power and our problems with the people in the community that want to help us. They want to help us raise our kids, and these are our kids, and our future is intertwined with their future, and it's something that we're learning about the resources that we are lucky to have here. And when we talk about some of these innovative new programs, the first question that we ask ourselves is, well, we could do this new thing with the community, but compared to what? Compared to what we could accomplish in the courtroom, in the traditional due process model versus what we might be able to accomplish in a way that really touches the heart of a young person while they're still developing their own sense of what they want to be. And the other thing that we've learned is that we have to build these things. They don't exist. So if you want to use alternatives, you have to build alternatives. And we've been able to do that to some degree. We're just getting started. There are many, many more things that we can and want to do in this arena. And one of which was highlighted on the front page of the Seattle Times yesterday. I don't know if you got to see the article on Peacemaking Circle. So it's only one of a number of things that we're going to talk about. But without further ado, I'm going to ask Jimmy, are you going to go first?
I am.
Okay, so director of our newly formed juvenile division, something we did this summer to recognize that the juvenile...
Summer of 2017 or
yes,
16?
17.
Okay.
I created the Division of Juvenile Prosecutors so that we would attract people who want to work in this arena. It's no longer just a place where you rotate through the office, but we're going to attract people who want to work with young people, want to work with the community, and come up with some innovative alternatives. So Jimmy has done a great job in leading that. I will turn it over to him.
Thank you, Mr. Satterberg, and we'll turn to Mr. Hung now. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. I want to second what Dan was saying about your investment in Mr. Thomas. I've got to work with him very closely for the last several months, and he's pushing me really hard to continue innovating and doing the great things that we're doing, and I'm happy to come here and share some of them with you. As Dan mentioned, one of our really great, innovative programs that was highlighted in the Seattle Times just yesterday is our work with peacemaking circles. This is a collaboration with community members who have formed together to volunteer. They call themselves a peacemaking coordinating team of King County. And basically this is...
That's their name?
Right, we call them the PCT for short.
All right.
And this is essentially the system handing over a young person back to the community so that the community can work with them. I'm going to share the story of this young man, Ramon. He was 15 years old. He was the first person to go through our peacemaking pilot. As you can see, in August of 2015, he made a very juvenile type of decision that was a very serious case. What he did was he decided to set up a deal with a classmate to buy his Air Jordans, and instead of buying them, he robbed him of them. And as we sit here as grown adults, we can see how foolish of a decision that was. So pretty soon after, his classmate told his parents. They called the police. They were at Ramon's house within an hour, and they arrested him. He fully confessed. He was looking at a robbery in the first degree because he was armed with a replica gun. And so, as we know, in the state of Washington, a young person who's charged with robbery in the first degree with no history like Ramon could face up to 2 years in our juvenile JRA system. And as we know, in Washington, it costs us approximately $110,000 a year to house someone in our JRA system. We were approached by a teacher from Interagency Academy in Seattle who knew this young person, believed in him, and so we decided to take a chance on him. And so after approximately 8 months of this young man sitting in very intensive circles in the community, we're talking a 15-year-old who's sitting in a circle with grown-ups for 3 hours at a time, talking about his emotions, talking about his challenges, talking about the difficulties that he is dealing with, and then with community members embracing him, listening to him, and offering advice. We went from where the traditional prosecution would have taken months to litigate with hearing after hearing after hearing, an adversarial process that kind of drives a further wedge between this young person and our community, and then, like I said, a potential of almost 2 years at JRA at $110,000 a year. Instead, we worked with this young man for 8 to 9 months. It was a community-driven response that met his needs. It was a restorative process that brought healing to this family and to the community. And in the end of it, he received a 12-month deferred sentence on misdemeanors with community service. And I'm happy to tell you that today he completed that deferred sentence. He got the cases dismissed. He's graduated from high school. He has a job. He's enrolling in South Seattle Community College. And probably most importantly for him, he just bought his first new car. And so this is a young person who I'm confident is going to be a leader in our community, and has essentially turned himself around, and I'm very proud to have met him. And so far we've piloted 4 cases through this process. 2 of them have been very successful. One has had a setback, and we're really, as a program, I think it's responsible for us to look at the decisions we made. Can we improve on them? But as Dan mentioned, what we're doing is better than what. I think the young person that had the setback, I'm pretty convinced that had we gone through the traditional system, that setback might have probably came sooner. But the community worked with them, and they tried their best, and we're going to learn from that experience. So like I said, during the time that Ramon was working with us, no new offenses. He was actively engaged in looking for employment. He was engaged in pro-social activities. This is a picture of him working at the Art Source program, I believe, with our county.
And he's the one in the middle.
Yes, he is the one in the middle. Another great thing he did this summer was he completed an internship with our county executive's office. The other great program that I'm happy to talk about that you all know very well is FERS. This is also a program that's has been doing incredibly well. As you all know, it's diverted hundreds of cases out of our juvenile justice system. What's great about the FERS program, and touching on the issue that I think is very important with this committee, is the issue of disproportionality. So what we know about juvenile domestic violence in King County is that over 50% of the cases involve youth of color, when only a third of our population are youth of color. And so this program directly helps in offsetting the disproportionality numbers if we can divert more of these cases out of the system. But even more importantly than just diverting them out of the system is that we're getting these families exactly services as soon as possible. But what we found is we opened up our first center last summer in July of 2016, and early on, we were getting the program up and running, and we were like, wow, we have 7 beds and we're not filling them all the time. What I'm here to tell you is that we are filling them all the time. In the last month, we had at least 5 occasions where we had to, in fact, book kids into detention because our first center was full. And so that's certainly a need that we see maybe coming back to the council and asking for more support on that. So family intervention services, it's immediate delivery of services to families in crisis. It decreased our juvenile DV filings by 62% in the first year. Another great aspect of the FERS program is, unlike other traditional forms of diversion that do not do a very good job of engaging communities of color, our normal King County diversion, we have a much higher engagement rates with white youth and white families, and then for a variety of reasons, it's not as effective in engaging black youth or Hispanic youth. However, what we have found in the FERS program in the first year of its inception is that when we look at its engagement rates, it is equitable across the board. In fact, our FERS program does a slightly better job of engaging families of color than white families. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Thomas now to talk about our 180 program.
Just a second, but Mr. Hung, what does that mean as to the percentage of young people in FERS who are non-white?
So let's take normal King County diversion. If you're a white youth, the diversion program just does a better job of engaging you. And whether it's because the program is better at finding the family and convincing them to engage in the services being offered, or whatever it is, white youth engage with regular diversion at a much higher rate than youth of color. What's great about FERS, though, is that the families, regardless of race, engage with the FERS program and the staff at the same rate. And why I think that...
But what does that mean?
Well, what that means, I think, is that regardless of what the color of your skin is, the FERS program is just as effective across the board. It has equity across the board. And I think it does that because we're providing the services at the time that the family needs it, when they call 911 and they're asking for help. And so you can imagine that regardless of the color of your skin, if you're in crisis and you're asking for the help and the county is there to provide that help, you're going to take it. Whereas if we wait a month later and then we're sending out snail mail to get people to come and engage with us, at that point they've already lost interest or they've lost faith in the system and they've checked out.
So the participants are like 20% Latino, 40% black, and 40% white, something like that?
I don't know.
I'm trying to figure out what equity means in your way of talking about it.
I think we're talking about a couple of different things. Juvenile domestic violence referrals, like the cases that come in, it is disproportionate.
Oh, it
so
is? Okay.
55% of the cases, juvenile DV cases that come into our office represent youth of color.
Okay.
And so it is disproportionate because my understanding is that a youth of color make up about a third of our population.
Yeah. Okay.
So
That's very helpful for what I was asking. So I want to have time for Mr. Thomas, so we're going to move to him. Welcome, sir.
Well, good afternoon, Mr. Chair, and it's an honor to be here with the rest of the county members as well. It's an honor to be in this position to work for the prosecutor's office and be the director of community justice initiatives. And my focus is going to be on what I have done in the last 9 months to strengthen some of our existing diversion programs and also to build out some new ones as well. And I'm going to start with Choose 180. I know that the council has been a fan of Choose 180 since it was started in 2011. And some of the reasons why it has been so effective, we've diverted over 400 youth per year, and it has a positive impact on youth of color that's greater than anyone else. And the reason for that is really as credible messengers. And when we say that word credible messengers, those are people who are from the community, who look like the kids who are part of the program, who have shared life experiences, who understand what they're going through and can really empathize with the situation that they're in. And it's hearing a message from those community members is what really impacts the lives of the kids that have been involved in the 180 program. I'm going to just give some highlights for where we have been. I already talked about the number of cases we diverted, but it's been 2,000 cases since 2011. And as I said before, the 180 program is more effective than traditional diversion, reducing juvenile recidivism, and more infecting and impacting race and ethnic disparities. And also the 2012 University of Washington study found that the 180 program is more effective at reaching youth, helping them change behavior, and the positive effects were lasting. And some of the ways that we've been able to expand Choose 180 over the last 9 months is, one, we've been able to get some private funding in order to hire outreach specialists. That means that kids who were not responding to letters in the mail, who were not responding to phone calls, we actually have someone now who's able to actually go to their houses, go to their schools, knock on some doors, and really get them to and encourage them to participate in the program. And then the other piece that is really powerful as well is after the program, that same outreach specialist is now working to connect those kids with services within the community. And that's really a place where the council can continue to partner with us, is helping to build out that aftercare program. I was just bumped into a young lady just in the chambers earlier today who was part of the 180 program. But I know the thing that was most transformative in her life was all the mentorship that she received afterwards. It was the follow-up. It was the people who continued to connect with her and call her, engage her, and to this day are following up with her. That is what has helped to transform her life.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Another kind of important involvement of the 180 program is that they're also now starting to do young adult diversion. So they are doing a pilot program with the city of Seattle where they are diverting now misdemeanor cases for 18 to 24-year-olds. The city is taking the lead in that.
Which city?
The city of Seattle.
Okay.
But that's something that we can also, we were just having a discussion. I was up in the middle of the night doing some work, and I say, Dan, we have to begin to divert misdemeanor cases, 18 to 24-year-olds. The problem is that we really don't have the funding within our existing budget in order to do that.
Did you say you called your boss in the middle of the night?
I didn't call him. I emailed him.
It was 2:30 in the morning.
I emailed them in the middle of the night. I couldn't sleep,
right.
and I was working. So, I think the 180 program, we're doing great things. We're moving forward. But I want to talk about something that has consumed me for the last 9 months, and that's juvenile gun violence. Maybe about a year or so ago, our office formed an African American Advisory Council. Councilmember Gossett is a member of that council. And the reason was really to help give us a connection to the community, a deeper connection to the community, and also give us some guidance on what are some of the projects or some of the initiatives that we should be working on. And one of the first things that council wanted us to address was juvenile gun violence. And so we went to work. We started studying what could we do? What are some of the precursors to someone pulling out a firearm and shooting someone? And we began to find out that it actually starts with juvenile gun possession. In 2016, we had 36 unlawful possession of a firearm in the second-degree cases. Of those 36 cases, 3 of those youth are now at the RJC facing adult charges, 1 for murder, 1 for drive-by shooting, another one for a robbery in the first degree. And tragically, 2 of those kids are now dead due to gun violence and risky behavior. So when we saw those numbers, and then we also looked at the racial disproportionality of those crimes. It's 88% of the kids who get caught for unlawful possession of a firearm are kids of color. Over half of them are African American, primarily from South Seattle and South King County. We had a couple outliers from Mercer Island, but that was the exception. And so we decided, we put our heads together, what can we do? And so, let's see. One of the things I want to mention before I move on is, I had the opportunity to go down to Green Hill, which is our juvenile prison down in Centralia, to talk with a group of 12 African-American men and to ask them, why do kids carry guns? And the two things that they overwhelmingly said to me was, I do it because I feel unsafe and it makes me feel powerful. I get a sense of respect. When I show up on the block and they know that I'm strapped, that all of a sudden I get a newfound sense of respect. And those are the two things. And so when we were thinking about a program, what could we do? We wanted to focus on something that was going to change that thinking, because that's actually a false idea that carrying a gun, it actually makes you less safe than more safe.
More risk.
And it does not make you powerful, because you then become a target for people who know that you have a gun. They're going to be out on the streets looking for you. So we partnered with Sarome Fong and the Peacemaking Coordinating Team. This is the same group of folks who are partnered with us with our Peacemaking Circle cases. And we are running right now a small pilot program for 12 kids who are arrested in Kent for unlawful possession of a firearm. These are kids who were taking pictures of themselves and posting videos of themselves on Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat and other social media accounts with them, being tough with guns in their hands. They were going out to the woods, they were shooting guns. And a concerned community member saw this, was a public post on Facebook, and contacted the Kent Police Department. The police department did an investigation. They found out who these kids were. They tracked them down, and they swooped them up and arrested them. And they did this right at the same time as we were talking about what kind of alternatives, what kind of difference could we do with these types of cases. And so when we got gifted with these 12 cases, we decided that we were going to reach out to our community partner, Sarome Fong, and see if we can do something different. And what came out of that discussion is called the Young Warrior Program. And what it is, it's a three-day peacemaking circle, which means that for 3 days, those kids are not with folks from the system. They're with community members, they're with credible messengers, and they're talking about, why are you carrying a gun? They're talking about trying to change the thinking about what are your goals? What do you see yourself doing in the future? Trying to get at some of the deeper reasons of why these kids are walking around with firearms. And the powerful thing is not just the message that these credible messengers share with them, it's also the bonds that these young people form with one another. And they begin to hold one another accountable. A couple of weeks ago, we were at, Jimmy and I and a few other folks from my office were at a community circle where two young men were getting towards the end of a peacemaking circle process, actually the one that's highlighted in the Seattle Times. And at that community circle were two of these young men from the Young Warriors program. They didn't have to be there. They weren't required. They showed up because a bond has been formed amongst these young men, and they want to be there for one another and hold one another accountable. So after that 3-day circle, there's going to be 3 months of follow-up. That follow-up is going to entail the PCT, the Peacemaking Coordinating Team members are going to be visiting their schools, visiting their homes, engaging with their parents.
These are volunteers or paid staff?
We actually paid for this out of our existing budget. It was not a whole lot of money, but these folks, the PCT, they so much believe in this process. They want to be engaged with these young people that they were willing to do it even though they weren't going to get paid a lot of money. So we paid for it out of our existing resources. And I think it's important to note that the majority of these young people are youth of color. There's 12 kids who are originally in the program, and 10 of those kids are youth of color. And so if we really want to focus on reducing racial disproportionality in the criminal justice system, we need to be able to provide alternatives for kids who are committing crimes that are racially disproportionate. So I'm going to move on to another partnership that we formed this past summer, and that's with an organization called Community Passageways, which is led by a man by the name of Dominique Davis. who
Is he in that picture?
he is in the picture. He's at the bottom to the right with a blue shirt on, sitting down.
I see him.
So Dom Davis is a good friend of mine. You know, we were connected a lot when he was doing the 180 program, and he is off doing bigger and better things. And one of the things that he did was lead this summer program. It was a summer school originally it was going to be for 10 African American young men. And I think I just talked with Dom before I came here, and he's like, you know, it was supposed to be 10 young men, but people were hearing about it in the community, and so more young people were showing up. And I think by the end of it, they had about 20. It was a summer school curriculum for kids who were
Some
just
of
as,
them look like they're women too.
you know, I don't know if the young lady,
Somebody said something.
The women I've involved were interns from,
Oh, the women were interns.
yeah, they were able to intern from out of, actually, they were going to school out of Southwick. So Community Pathways paid them to intern with us to build a collect data.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
you know, and that's one of the things about the summer program too. So these kids, you know, they were catching up on their credits. Many of these youth were justice involved. So if they completed the program, we were going to give them a reduction on their case. And also they were receiving stipends. And you know, that's the thing, that they were getting actually some money in their pocket to participate in that program, which means that they didn't need to, you know, to go out and try to use some illegal means in order to get some cash. This is just as an example. We did not pay for this. This was a grant through the city of Seattle, but we just, you know, Dom reached out to us and wanted to partner, and we said, you know, kids who complete this program, we want to give them a reduction on their case. So if they have a felony, we want to knock it down to a
And what
misdemeanor.
percentage of them finished?
If I'm correct, all of them finished. All of them finished.
We have all of them finished.
Yeah.
There was about 2 of the youth that actually succeeded the entire completion of getting all the hours that they needed, but majority of them all went through the program. They all were able to get their charges either knocked off, but they all got paid for it as well.
And the thing that we found out, is Dom found out, is that the needs that these kids had, I know there was at least 1 or 2 of them who were homeless at the time when they were going through this program. And the other gaps that we found as well is, you know, we wanted to continue this on. We didn't want it was an 8-week summer program. We didn't want it to stop after those 8 weeks. We wanted to go on into the school year, but there was no funding in order to do that. There's also no funding to do it next summer. So we have a great example of a program that's led by people of color, that's reducing racial disproportionality, that's getting kids, reducing felony and misdemeanor convictions, but right now we don't have any funding to continue that.
So why did you happen to mention that to us?
Why did I help to mention that? Because you know, Mr. Gossett, you have control of the purse strings.
I thought that was one that might have been
And you can
one
also
of the reasons.
advocate for,
I thought that might have been one of the reasons.
that was one of the reasons. I want to keep quickly, I want to come to the
One more
end.
thing and we gotta go.
You know, creative
Good
justice
hire, Mr.
is
Satterberg. Good hire.
Creative
Go ahead.
Justice is another great program that we partner. I don't want to go into all
That's
the
already
details
down
as
at
well.
Juvie.
It's already going on. They're doing great work. Also, primarily youth of color who are in that program. Every 12 weeks, we have another cohort of 12 young people who go through Creative Justice.
Does Nikita still work for him?
Nikita does still work for them, yes. And I know that you have seen these numbers, how we have significantly reduced the population within our referrals, our filings, and the population within our detention center. Lastly, we do have a couple of asks, and I'm going to pass it
All
over
right.
to Mr. Satterberg.
We'd never want to show up
All
here
right.
without asking for something.
Okay, Dan, we're gonna give you 2 minutes
Okay.
to make these asks.
The antidote to youth violence, to youth crime, it's not a secret. It's not rocket science. It's social science, so it's harder. But it's connection. It's connection to positive adult role models and mentors, and removing them from the environment that they're surrounded with and showing them a different future. And that can be done with all of these things. I think that we have shown that we have a community that's willing to partner with us. And what we are often missing, though, is the money to pay them, because the community brings value and they should be paid for that value, and they can't be expected to do it on a volunteer basis or with capacity that we think they might have in their program. They don't have that capacity, and they need to pay the bills like the rest of us. So what we have for criminal justice reform, you need 3 things. You need a prosecutor and a system that's willing to share power You need a community that's willing to step up and accept that challenge and apply their unique resources to it, and you need money to pay them. And so what I would ask you to consider as we look at whether it's Best Starts for Kids or other funding is three things. I think we need to expand our FERS program, and there's a huge need for it down in the south part of the county.
Did you say FERS?
FERS, expand FERS. I think we need a new center down in the south end. It would be full on day one. I think we need to continue to support the peacemaking coordinating team in their efforts and expand the capacity. Tremendous number of people in our community are interested in restorative justice programs, and we certainly have no shortage of cases that I think would be appropriate for that. That's where those connections are established that go on, that change lives. And finally, we have a lot of credible messengers, a lot of young men and women who want to work with young people. They may not have anything in their background in terms of an academic credential, but I would love to work with Dr. Troupin and his group to come up with a credible messenger academy to compress maybe an MSW program into a quarter of classes and to supply people with some of the tricks of the trade, whether it's motivational interviewing, cognitive behavioral therapies, ethics, boundaries, laws, the kind of things that people need before the government essentially forces a young person to go have contact with this person. We need to make sure that that credible messenger has the skills that they need reasonably to make a difference and to have the kind of supervision and network that they need to do the best possible job. But we have a unique opportunity here in this county, and we're just getting started, and we definitely want you to be our partners in it as well.
Okay. Well, I think I can safely say we will be interested and open to talking to you all about that. And when we get down to it, we're going to have to get specific on how much money in 2018 or 2019 and 20, and how much of it can come from Best Starts for Kids, because we just put 2 years ago $450 million in there. So we're open to talking about that. I'm going to allow the two council members that have their hands up say something, and then we have to move on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be really quick. I love the curriculum you thought of on that, and I hope empathy training is added to that list. I was going to say what he just said, but there's money in Sound Transit 3 for education, and I think that's a place where we haven't
that's
looked
another
before,
place.
and we're going to be deciding shortly how we're going to spend that money, and I think that might be a good place, and I think that's $300 million over the next
19 years,
Yeah, so,
18, 19 years.
and I think that's a good place for that to be, because we want to keep kids in school, and that's good. And then the other thing on gun violence is, for me, gun violence starts with abuse and neglect at home, and then also not having success in school. And those two things, I think, we have to continue working with. And I just wanted to know, for a while, we were saying that 1/3 of the kids coming in were from Seattle. Is that still true? And we were having troubles that it was taking us more than 30 days to get kids back into school from our detention center. Is that still happening?
I think
You got to talk into the mic, sir.
the 1/3 number is still about the same. What was your second question?
That it was taking more than 30 days to get kids back into Seattle schools after they were released from our school at the detention center?
I'm sorry, I don't exactly know the answer to that.
Okay, so why don't you get back to her or some of us on that so we'll know the answer. Councilmember Cole Wells, and then we have to move on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've been very taken with the Creative Justice Program. As I recall, however, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that in last year's biennial budget, we did not provide all the funding that was requested. So what is the status of the program now?
It is still running, but they are quickly running out of cash. I was actually in the middle of the night also emailing with Aaron Counts, who is the executive director of Creative Justice, about applying for a Best Starts for Kids grant for outreach and case management. Have a meeting set up with Aaron Counts and Zach Davis, who's the head of the Stopping the School to Prison Pipeline program manager, on November 15th, to kind of really highlight the great work that Creative Justice has been doing and to ensure that they do get some funding for Best Starts for Kids. because they are doing some really, really great work.
And is it operated through For Culture?
It is operated through For Culture. They also got a grant from the National Foundation of the Arts, and I believe that that grant from the National Foundation has dried up. I can't remember exactly how much funding that they are getting still from For Culture, but I do know the funding that they're getting from For Culture is not enough to pay for all the services of creative justice.
Okay, thank you.
On behalf of our Law and Justice Committee, I'd like to thank the 4 of you, our staff, and the 3 of you from the prosecuting office. It was an excellent update and report, and I actually look forward to the follow-up communications and work sessions that we'll have to make progress in terms of better defining the program, better involving a larger number of youth, and better serving them where they are able to, have a vision of hope, and actually we'll be able to help them get some hope in terms of housing and gigs and other things like that. All right? Thank you.
Thank you.